I'm sitting with Sidney Goodman. He is the author of this amazing book, Asleep at the Geiger Counter, and he has 50 years of experience being on the front line of engineering, research, design, and development. And Sidney, take it away.
Yeah, I once actually liked nuclear power. I was once proud to have helped United Aircraft win a contract for a nuclear rocket. I worked on the temperature control. But then I learned from some of the most highly qualified, conscionable scientists about things that were being held back, that were being censored. And I became aware of what was happening. And even Peter Bradford, who was once a commissioner for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, he said what informed people knew all along. He said the first casualty of nuclear power was the truth. He said the history of nuclear power is a history of silenced concerns, rigged studies, and suppressed scientists. And I learned that nuclear power actually means cancer everywhere, birth defects forever, the uncontrolled proliferation of nuclear weapons, the loss of civil liberties, the undermining of our national defense, skyrocketing utility rates, and unending multi-billion-dollar subsidies which take money away from cleaner, safer, and much less costly energy alternatives. What do you mean by a rigged study? Well, a prime example of a rigged study was the Rasmussen report, or WASH 1400. This report basically said that the chance of a nuclear accident would be, about 1 billion to 1. And this report was touted as proving how brilliant and rational nuclear proponents were and how irrational and stupid everyone else was. This report left out human error, wars, terrorism, drug addiction, alcoholism, tsunamis, and a host of things that could really cause a disaster. It left them out. As an engineer, I became aware early on that claims that were being made by nuclear promoters violated the most elementary principles of physics, engineering, common sense, and decency. For example, the industry had discovered a new law of physics. They discovered that if you have a nuclear disaster, when the wind doesn't blow, the poison's far away. And so they're very happy with a 10-mile evacuation zone. Oh, that's plenty good enough to see the wind stops blowing. That's really high-class physics. Even though the accident at 3 Mile Island, which came within a half an hour of a full-scale disaster, it was only a partial meltdown. It came within a half an hour of a complete meltdown. That blew poisons hundreds of miles. The Chernobyl disaster in the Soviet Union blew the poisons all around the world. And at Fukushima, the poisons also are blowing the poisons all the way to the United States and beyond. And so the problems are very serious indeed. Right here in the United States, we have the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which it fits snugly in the pocket of the nuclear industry, the industry they're supposed to regulate. They do a very poor job of regulation. And even now, in Fukushima is having a disaster which is far from over. It seems to be getting worse and worse as time goes by, although there's been a media blackout on it. It was released that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission had knowledge of the serious problems with the Fukushima nuclear plants, and they kept this knowledge out of the public mind. And this resulted in the Japanese government failing to take adequate steps to evacuate the people surrounding Fukushima, allowing them to receive high levels of radiation. The New York Times reported on August 9th that the mayor of a town near Fukushima believes that the withholding of information was akin to murder. And Paul Gunter of Beyond Nuclear has just announced that the poisons being released from Fukushima are 20 times worse than the poisons that were released at Hiroshima. And the thing, it looks like the accident is it could be getting a lot worse, and the United States could be affected. And people have been hurt already, although this is being suppressed, and the media is suppressing this, and even not only is the NRC, the United States, suppressing this, but Great Britain is also suppressing this because they don't want to give nuclear power a bad name. The horror of nuclear weapons made it necessary to put a friendly face on nuclear technology. And and you see, the same industry that makes nuclear weapons makes nuclear power. The same factory that's used to enrich uranium to make weapons is used to enrich uranium to make nuclear fuel. The only thing is that for nuclear power, you don't enrich the fuel to the same extent as you do for making weapons, but it's the same factory. It was all part of the military-industrial complex, a complex that President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about. The thing is that some of these poisons are tremendous. Like, for example, plutonium. The tiniest speck of plutonium is deadly for 250,000 years. Iodine-129 is deadly for 160 million years. And there are other poisons involved. In fact, in 1962, the chairman of the advisory board of the old Atomic Energy Commission testified to Congress. He admitted, oh sure, yeah, nuclear power will create poisons which are 1 million to 1 billion times worse than other chemicals, but don't worry, because human error and equipment flaws will never be allowed. Famous last words. And you even have a remarkable statement that was made once by Admiral Hyman Rickover. He was the father of our nuclear navy. You'd be maybe surprised, but he of all people said about 2 billion years ago it was impossible to have life on Earth because there was too much radiation occurring. And after that radiation subsided, it became possible to have life on this planet. Now, he said, going back to nuclear power, we're creating something which nature tried to destroy to make life possible. So every time you produce radiation, a horrible force is unleashed, and by splitting the atom, people are recreating the poisons that prevented life from existing. And I think that the human race is going to wreck itself. That was Hyman Rickover, the father of our nuclear navy. And the thing is, there was also a statement by, a surprising statement. This was an article that appeared in the Journal of Petroleum Technology, May of 1965, written by Dr. Edward Teller. Dr. Edward Teller was father of the hydrogen bomb. Well, before he collected fat fees to promote nuclear power, that's when he wrote this article. And he cautioned that a disaster at a nuclear plant could be more dangerous than a hydrogen bomb. And he said that nuclear plants do not belong on the face of the earth. They should be buried deep underground as a safety precaution. A burial has never been done because it would add 10% to construction costs. The thing is that what we have here is, the question is, well, why don't we make these nuclear plants safe? Well, yeah, you can make these nuclear plants safe. Here's what you have to do. You have to abolish human error. You have to abolish wars, terrorism, because they both could endanger a nuclear plant. You have to bury the nuclear plants deep underground, as recommended by Dr. Edward Teller. You have to be able to predict and control earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, tornadoes, and tsunamis for hundreds of thousands of years. You have to ensure that hundreds of thousands of materials and systems have no errors in it. They're flawless. You have to abolish the use of drugs and alcohol by operators of nuclear plants, although the usage of these substances occurs in facilities. About 10% of humans consume drugs and alcohol. Increase the evacuation zone from the present ridiculously inadequate 10-mile to as long as necessary. Even 200 miles may not be enough. Poison from Chernobyl, circle the globe. poisoned from 3 Mile Island, traveled hundreds of miles, went almost up to Canada. Ensure that all operators are mentally healthy and have absolute integrity that reaches far beyond their concern for their own selfish interests. Ensure that all operators are fully qualified, although many are far from that. Abolish the Price-Anderson Act. The Price-Anderson Act is a federal law which limits the liability of a nuclear operator to a microscopic fraction of the damage which can be occurred. It limits liability to $10 billion, which sounds like a lot, except that an accident at the Indian Point nuclear plant in New York could easily exceed $1 trillion damage. So you're talking about a reimbursement of 1 cent on a dollar. The question is, how do you like being worth 1 cent on a dollar, or a few cents on a dollar if you're near another nuclear plant? Are you patriotic? Do you have but one life to give to utility? Guarantee that all nuclear poisons will be isolated from the environment with a perfection of containment that is 99.999% for hundreds of thousands of years. That's what is really necessary. Although the thing is that, as published in the Congressional Record, in the first 30 years of the nuclear age, 2 to 3% of our nuclear waste already leaked into the environment. Now, a leakage of 0.001% is hazardous. 2 to 3% means that they were already thousands of times less reliable than they have to be. So these people who build nuclear plants near or right on top of earthquake faults, and even some are close to volcanoes. There was one not too far from Mount St. Helens. These things are ridiculous. They forget these things. So the thing is, if you really want to solve the nuclear waste problem, what you have to do is to retrieve and re-isolate all of these poisons which have leaked out and re-isolate them. Obviously they can't do that. So they used to tell us that they've been so perfect, these people that put nuclear plants on earthquake faults, that not a single member of the public has ever been harmed. Well, if you can believe that, I'd like to show you the Brooklyn Bridge. So the thing is, it's not a question of can we make nuclear power safe enough for people. There's no way to make people safe enough for nuclear power. The thing is that the Chernobyl accident was downplayed, just as the accident at 3 Mile Island was downplayed. People were told officially, the government has said no one was harmed. Thousands of people were harmed, according to independent investigators. And people were told, you weren't harmed, it's all your imagination. Well, that's what you would be told if you were harmed. Chernobyl was another cover-up. The Soviet government said, oh, don't worry about radiation, just drink a lot of wine. And three scientists waited until the full effects of radioactivity would become more evident. And they studied about 170,000 pieces of data. Much of that data was in the Slavic language and not available in translation. And what they wrote, the book, Chernobyl, Consequences of the Catastrophe for People and the Environment, and it was published by the New York Academy of Sciences. And what this report said, that between 1986 and 2004, 985,000 people were killed from Chernobyl. And by now it's certainly more than 1 million, and Chernobyl will continue to kill for hundreds, thousands of years. So it's a true disaster.